At 2 on ship time. A dead relay station chimed. Jonah Weller stared at a letter stamped years ago, addressed to his full name like someone had said it out loud. Who can reach a station this far, this late, and still find him? In under 8 hours, Cenotaph's only transmit window opens. If Jonah sends the warning, the station could overheat and fail. If he stays quiet, ships out there will move blind and start firing at shadows. He opens the sealed package anyway. At a little after 2 on ship time, the letter vault chimed. Jonah Weller froze in the service passage. One hand stayed on a warm panel latch. Inbound traffic was rare out here. Inbound traffic in the dead hours was rarer. Cenotaph Relay Station drifted on the edge of the pale drift. It sat roughly 600 million miles from Earth. Out here, dust haze turned radio into a slow, stubborn thing. The vault drawer lit green, then dimmed, as if it was unsure. Jonah pushed off the rail and floated closer. He should have filed it for later review. He should have pushed it onward in the next transmit window and never looked inside. The packet tag was plain, personal, non-priority. The timestamp made his stomach tighten. The station clock claimed the packet had been stamped years ago. The checksum said it was intact. The routing trail looked like a thicket of relays. Some of those relays were listed as inactive in the last quarterly report. Jonah whispered to no one, trying to keep his breathing steady. How did you get here? Then he saw the sender name, sitting in the corner with quiet certainty. Saren Kale. Jonah stared until his eyes went dry. The name was not on his contact list. Yet the packet had found Cenotaph. It had found him. He checked the recipient field. Jonah Weller. Not his duty code, not his call sign, his full name, spelled clean, as if the writer had once said it aloud. A question pressed into his mind and did not let go. Who could reach a dead relay years late and still address him like a memory? Jonah opened the packet. The text was short and steady. Jonah, if you are reading this, the station still has power. Keep your logs. Keep the queue honest. When the quiet starts, do not assume it is drift interference. He read it twice. The second time was slower. The words did not beg. They warned. A second chime followed, softer, like an echo. Another packet, same sender. Jonah opened it, and the cold in his chest deepened. This is not a love letter. I do not have the right to give you that. I am writing because you will be tempted to trust a clean code and a clean silence. Do not watch the map when the relays start blinking out. Jonah leaned back against the handrail. He listened to the station breathe. A pump cycled in the machinery bay. The sound was ordinary, yet it made his skin prickle. He forced himself to do something practical. He needed proof that the world still worked. He moved through the service passage with a wrench clipped to his belt. A filter cartridge rode under his arm. The air carried the bite of recycled oxygen and warm polymer. It was familiar as his own breath. A panel blinked for attention, asking for a check no one else would perform. He popped the latch, slid the cartridge free, and held it to the light. The mesh was dark with grit, fine as ash. The pale drift always found a way in, no matter how tight the seals were. He logged the swap, then he crossed to the thermal console and watched the heat settle. Radiator vanes outside the hull angled a fraction, like a slow exhale. If the station ran too hot, the transmitter would throttle. If the transmitter throttled, the queue would grow. If the queue grew, people stopped trusting the network. Out here, trust was the closest thing to oxygen. The next transmit window would open in under 8 hours. It was a narrow slice when the drift quieted enough for Cenotaph to push data through. If anything happened before then, Jonah would be stuck with it. He opened the deferred queue and skimmed the top packets. Weather pings from mining skiffs in the Nacre Belt. Course tweaks from cargo tugs crossing Kestrel Corridor. A few personal bundles with names he did not recognize. Sent because somebody still believed distance could be negotiated. He ate a strip of protein from the galley drawer. He chased it with warm water. The taste was flat, but it kept him moving. An old Earth broadcast played low in his headset, voices crackling through archived static. Then the letters came back to him, not as romance, but as a plan. Keep your logs. Keep the queue honest. When the quiet starts, do not assume it is drift interference? Jonah pulled up the routing details again. The letters had traveled through Vesper line relays. They skimmed a contested boundary where the Solace Compact and the Varick Dominion traded warnings and debris. Cenotaph sat just outside the main threat envelope. It was a lonely node. Neither side bothered to waste fuel on it. Yet these letters had threaded their way to his vault. They were signed by someone who understood timing. That made the warning feel more real than any official bulletin he had ever received. Jonah searched the queue for any other packets from the same source. There were none. He searched the archive and found only corrupted fragments. Sender data was stripped, as if the name had been erased on purpose. He did what he always did when uncertainty tightened around him. He checked the station. He checked it again. Transmitter diagnostics came back nominal. Thermal margin was narrower than last week. The radiator vanes were compensating more often. Oxygen scrubbers were steady, but the new filter cartridge had already started to darken. Then he tried to report the anomaly. Relay Stewardship Office maintained a priority channel for safety flags. Jonah wrote a brief note. Plain and careful, he attached the packet metadata. Inbound packet with timestamp inconsistency. Sender unknown. Possible routing through decommissioned relays. Request verification. He hit send. The console flashed a delay warning. Then it showed a red line he had not seen in months. Upstream acknowledgement pending. Estimated response time unknown. Unknown belonged to storms and collisions. It did not belong to an office near Earth with backups and fresh hands. Jonah tried a secondary address. Chief Tech Garrick Vale had used it to push maintenance advisories. No reply, no bounce, just waiting. Jonah stared at the silent indicator. The station suddenly felt larger, as if the walls had moved away. Isolation was normal. Abandonment was not. He made a manual ping to a neighboring relay. It was a polite knock across the network. The reply came back smeared and incomplete, like a voice underwater. It carried a single status bit before the channel collapsed again. Alive. Jonah exhaled and did not feel better. Alive meant someone could still pull the plug. He reread the second letter and held on one phrase. Do not trust a clean code. He opened the traffic logs for the last 72 hours. There was a shallow dip in background noise that should not exist. It was a clean lane briefly carved through the drift. He found a routing request approved automatically under a signature key he did not recognize. The system treated it as legitimate. Jonah opened his window journal and wrote a longer entry than usual. He recorded the sender name. He recorded the routing trail. He recorded the noise dip. He recorded the unknown signature. If something went wrong, he wanted a trail that did not depend on anyone else's memory. Then he opened the ghost map. Most nodes were steady dots. Tonight, the map looked ordinary. For a moment, he hated himself for being spooked by old letters. He almost closed it and went back to his quiet duties. A node near Vesper line flickered, then steadied. Another dimmed for a second, then returned. It was subtle, like bruising under skin. Not a full outage, but a sign that something had touched the network and let go. Jonah did not blink. A new alert appeared, not from the vault, but from the system locker. Maintenance package pending. Authorization level sealed. The system locker held routing tables and core modules. It was locked for a reason. Anything that touched it could touch the queue, the windows, the bones of the station. Jonah opened the header and felt his throat tighten. Lock seal helix engaged. Do not open without order. The origin claimed to be Relay Stewardship Office. That should have relieved him. Instead, it made his stomach clench. His reports were unanswered, yet an update arrived with perfect formatting. It looked like a gift wrapped too neatly. A clean code. Jonah pulled the package into an isolated sandbox. The smallest safe pocket he could create. He did not break the seal. He examined the edges, the signature format, the serial number spacing, and the way the authorization fields aligned too well. The signature matched the office pattern. The serial run did not align with any update he had received. The checksum looked too perfect, as if someone had polished it. He set it down and checked the ghost map again. The flickers were still there. Now they formed a chain. Small blinks stepped along Vesper line like footsteps that did not want to be heard. Someone was rehearsing. Jonah whispered into the empty corridor. "All right, I see you." He returned to the sandbox and made his choice. Waiting was the easy option. Waiting was how people died out here. Politely and on schedule. He triggered the manual override and broke the lock seal helix. The locker light flashed a warning. Jonah felt a hot flush of fear that made no sense in low gravity. He copied the package into quarantine and opened it with the most restrictive permissions he could enforce. He forced the code to reveal itself without letting it touch the transmitter controls. A new layer unfolded on his screen. It was not a letter. It was not a message. It was a set of hidden dependencies and dark routes that bypassed ordinary checks. Across Vesper line, a chain of relays was marked with a thin flag. The label made Jonah's mouth go dry. Quiet cut protocol. Jonah scrolled through the summary and read it like a confession. The steps were written for operators, not for debate. It would reduce outbound signal to the minimum. It would delay acknowledgements until senders gave up. It would invalidate external queries so nobody could confirm a station's status. It would lock transmitter access. It would mark the event as drift interference. It was a recipe for making a station vanish without an explosion. It was silence turned into policy. Jonah looked back at Saren Kale's letters and understood the ugly mercy of them. They were old, and someone had tried to bury them. Only now, as the protocol woke, had they slipped through the cracks. He pressed his palm to his forehead and let one sharp thought land. She tried to warn me. The station alarm sounded, low and steady. Unauthorized access detected. This time the system named him as the problem. Jonah lifted his head and listened to the pumps. The fans. The faint creak of cooling metal. The hum of Cenotaph had not changed. But the meaning of it had. He was not alone anymore. He was simply the last person who still knew how to listen. At first light on ship time, Jonah Weller shut down the quarantine sandbox and watched the alarm fade. Unauthorized access had framed him as the threat. Cenotaph kept humming, but it no longer sounded indifferent. He walked the short loop from the control bay to the recycler closet. He checked the oxygen scrubber pressure and the water reclaim rate. Everything was within spec, yet his shoulders stayed tight. The pale drift slid past the cameras like gray dust in slow motion. Out here, silence was normal. Tonight, silence felt engineered. 6 hours later, the next transmit window was close. That was when the approach warning arrived. Clean and confident. A vessel was braking along the Kestrel corridor and requesting dock alignment. Jonah pulled the handshake record and frowned. The identity code was valid, signed, and properly chained. One timing field was off by a fraction, like a watch set too fast. He ran the check again. The same tiny skew stared back at him. In the pale drift, small errors grew into missing weeks. He could refuse docking and keep his oxygen and water. He could accept and let trouble step inside his only shelter. He stood still, listening to recycler fans and his own breath. Cenotaph had 3 spare filter cartridges left. Fresh water was down to a narrow margin. If a relay coil failed, he could not fix it with hope. The request included a manifest for parts Cenotaph could use. Seal resin, a transmitter coupler rated for Cenotaph spool loads. It was a list designed to sound helpful. Jonah opened a channel on the public band. In scheduled traffic, identify your purpose, he said. A calm voice answered through light static. Relay Stewardship Office inspection run. Bringing maintenance and compliance review. Requesting minimum dock. The words fit the paperwork, but the skew did not. Jonah remembered the warning he had read hours ago. Do not trust a clean code. Jonah kept his voice steady. Minimum dock granted. No crew movement until I confirm seals, he replied. He cycled the outer ring to docking posture and reduced internal pressure by a hair. If anything ruptured, he wanted leaks to go outward. He locked the letter vault service hatch and set it to manual. The incoming craft slid into view on the exterior cameras. A small skiff, paint worn thin, thrusters firing in short, Precise bursts. Its hull markings matched the office registry down to the last stencil. Magnetic pads kissed and held. Status lights went green and stayed there. Jonah allocated the smallest guest allowance he could justify. Enough oxygen and water for one person. He did not give more than a day. Not even in his head. He keyed the intercom. Dock secured. State your name and clearance, he said. A pause lasted one beat too long. Then the reply came, smooth as routine. Saren Kale, Field Compliance Technician. Clearance tier sufficient for relay audit. Jonah felt the station tilt, though it did not. He had seen that name in the letter vault. Now it was outside his hatch. He swallowed and forced his hands to stay steady. Wait for my green light. I will open the inner lock, he said. He checked equalization twice, then watched the ghost map. The bruised flickers had spread another node. When the lock light turned ready, Jonah opened the inner hatch. Cold air sighed, then stabilized. Saren Kale stepped through in a plain inspection suit, face uncovered. She carried a slim case and a sealed tablet. Both were tagged with office labels. Her eyes scanned the corridor like she was reading bolts and welds. The look was not curious. It was inventory. Jonah kept his hands visible. You are early for a compliance visit, he said. Schedules change near Vesper Line, Saren replied. Her voice had the same steady cadence as the letters, only colder. She glanced toward the control bay. Your dock seals are clean. You keep a good station, she said. Praise should have helped. Instead, it sounded like a note for a report. In the control bay, Saren stopped at the main console. She did not touch it. She watched the radiator vanes correct to hold thermal margin. You run the transmitter close to its safe line, she said. I run it to keep the queue moving, Jonah replied. Saren nodded once. May I see the deferred queue and the letter vault index? She asked. Jonah kept his face blank. Queue is operational. Vault is private traffic, he said. Saren lifted her tablet so he could see the authorization header. It was perfect. Too perfect. Periodic review is within my mandate, she said. You can watch every action I take, Jonah replied. Jonah studied the authentication trail as she logged in. It routed through Relay Stewardship Office. Then through a hop he did not recognize. The hop looked like a dead node dressed in new keys. Read only, Jonah said. Vault headers only. Saren accepted without argument. Her fingers moved fast, practiced, and quiet. She paused on the packet list, then on the seal log. You opened a sealed package, she said. Jonah did not blink. Unauthorized access flagged me after I opened it, he replied. I never sent a report beyond this station. Saren set the tablet down and folded her hands. Then you already know what you were not supposed to know, she said. Jonah felt his pulse in his throat, but his voice stayed even. How did you know I opened it? He asked. Saren tilted her head slightly. Because the station started shouting in a private language, she replied. People who listen for that language heard it. Jonah kept his eyes on her. Are you here because of the letters? He asked. Saren held his gaze for a moment. I am here because a node like this can decide a war, she said. And because offices do not like surprises. Jonah chose his words carefully. Do you work for the office? He asked. I work for the signature on my orders, Saren replied. A soft chirp sounded from her suit collar. Almost inaudible. She touched it once, casual, as if scratching an itch. Then her gaze returned to Jonah, sharp and unreadable. You have a transmit window soon, she said. I will need to verify your journal and your spool limits. Jonah nodded, as if the request were harmless. His palms were damp. Cenotaph suddenly felt like contested ground. Jonah pointed toward the small galley alcove beside the bay. You want water? He asked. It is recycled, but it is clean. I do not need comfort, Saren replied. Jonah tried a different angle. People call this place the graveyard relay, he said. They joke because messages arrive late. Saren's eyes flicked, almost a flinch. Late messages still change outcomes, she said. Sometimes they change them in the worst way. She tapped the tablet and brought up another request. Open your system locker header, she said. I need to verify your update chain. Jonah felt his spine tighten. The locker is sealed for a reason, he replied. Vault and queue are enough for an audit. Saren held his gaze. Then you will keep living with questions, she said. Saren opened the slim case and laid out tools in neat rows. A seal tester, a fiber brush, a small coil driver. At the far end was a compact sidearm, black and quiet. Jonah kept his voice low. In case of pirates? He asked. In case of mistakes, Saren replied. Jonah glanced at the ghost map again. Another relay near Vesper line flickered, then steadied. The network looked bruised, not broken. Which was worse? 2 hours later, Jonah caught the first sign of sabotage in a place most people ignored. The thermal limit table had shifted by a narrow margin, small enough to look like drift correction. It leaned the wrong way. Cenotaph began to heat faster under ordinary load. The transmitter throttle warning came early. Life support trimmed fresh airflow to conserve. The air tasted faintly metallic, like a bad filter. Jonah checked the scrubber schedule and found it moved by a few minutes. The shift would push the recycler into a hotter cycle during the window. He opened the change log. An edit had been applied under his own operator token, with an office cosign. He had not touched it. He turned toward Saren. She sat at the auxiliary terminal, posture relaxed, eyes on the scroll. She looked like a technician doing her job. Step away from the terminal, Jonah said. The station is trending hot. Let the controls stabilize, Saren replied. I know what stable looks like, Jonah said. This is a push toward failure. The overheat alarm rose from yellow to orange. A coolant pump kicked hard and vibrated through the deck. Life support tightened again and the corridor felt drier. In a day, conservation mode would feel like drowning. In an hour, it would make him sloppy. Sloppy was how accidents were manufactured. Jonah tried to undo the edits. The system refused and requested secondary authorization. A clean request, as if it were normal. Give me the second key, Jonah said. Saren stood slowly and held up a small data wafer. You can stop the alarm, she said. You only need to accept the compliance lock. What does the lock do? Jonah asked. It limits your transmitter access, Saren replied. It preserves the spool. It prevents operator error. Jonah heard the lie in the smoothness. He had seen quiet cut protocol in the sealed package. He knew what silence could be made to resemble. That is not protection, Jonah said. That is a muzzle. You do not see the wider plan, Saren replied. I see people dying blind, Jonah said. I see convoys arriving late and getting shredded. Saren lifted her chin, as if she wanted to argue. Then she stopped, and the pause felt like a crack. She slipped a compact tool from her suit, a soft entry kit. I can fix what is broken, she said. Or I can make it look broken. Jonah's eyes flicked to the sidearm on the table. He did not reach for anything. In a sealed station, a fight was a physics problem. He opened the manual override panel and isolated thermal controls from the network. The work was clumsy and slow, but it was physical. He seated the last jumper and the controller dropped into local mode. The radiator vanes snapped to a new angle. Heat began to fall, slow and reluctant. Orange faded back to yellow. Why? Jonah asked. Saren glanced at her collar, as if listening to a private band. Then she spoke, quiet and precise. Because if Cenotaph stays loud, people will follow your signal, she said. And if they follow, they will arrive in time to be killed. By who? Jonah asked. By the side that wins when the other side cannot coordinate, Saren replied. Jonah felt the shape of Admiral Varen Holt's strategy without hearing the name. He also saw tension in Saren, like a hand holding something back. You could have ended me when the alarm went orange, Jonah said. In that moment, it would look like an accident. For now, you are still useful, Saren replied. It was the answer she was supposed to give. Her breathing was too controlled, as if she was holding something down. "Did you write the letters?" Jonah asked. "Those letters were written by someone I used to be," Saren said. Outside, the pale drift rolled past like silt in slow water. Inside, Jonah understood the truth he had avoided. A valid code could open a door. It could also lock it forever. On the next cycle, the station felt smaller. Not because the hull changed, but because the map did. Jonah Weller pulled up the ghost map and watched nodes along the Vesper line blink from pale blue to gray. The first two returned after a heartbeat, like a relay clearing dust from its throat. The third stayed dark, then a fourth, then a fifth. They were spaced along the corridor like streetlights dying one by one. He tried not to imagine crews inside those dots. He tried to keep it technical. A relay went offline. A routing path collapsed. A packet would reroute, or it would not. Saren Kale stood behind him, hands clasped, eyes on the same screen. She did not look surprised. That was its own kind of answer. The transmit window was less than an hour away. Jonah should have been trimming the deferred queue and warming the transmitter. Instead, he watched the network lose its teeth. A faint alert chimed. Not from the office channel. Not even from the public band. It came as a malformed packet the station almost discarded as noise. Jonah quarantined it and opened the header. The checksum was shredded. The content was smeared into broken symbols. But the routing tag was legible. Kestrel Corridor. He ran the packet through error repair. Not expecting much. A few words surfaced, jagged and out of order. Dominion Fleet. Inbound. Keep dark. Do not answer. Saren leaned closer, her voice flat. That is not a civilian warning. It is a warning, Jonah said. From someone who will be dead by the time it reaches anyone. Saren replied. Jonah felt heat rise under his collar. If the Varick Dominion is moving mass through Kestrel Corridor, the Solace Compact needs to know, he said. Saren did not argue the fact. She argued the consequence. If they know late, they will panic late, she said. They will fire at the first shadow. Jonah stared at the broken packet until the words blurred. The attack was not a beam. The attack was time. He opened the ghost map logs. The outages were too clean, too evenly spaced. They did not match random drift interference. They matched a checklist. Quiet cut protocol. Saren spoke again, as if reading his thought. They call it mercy, she said. Make the enemy blind. End it faster. That is not mercy, Jonah replied. That is how you get convoys shot by mistake. Saren looked away for the first time since she boarded Cenotaph. Convoys get shot anyway, she said. Jonah set his jaw and opened a direct ping to the nearest relay still showing alive. The ping went out and came back empty, like a knock into a padded wall. The station's background noise dropped another fraction, unnaturally smooth. The pale drift did not behave like that. Dust did not synchronize. Jonah realized with a chill that Cenotaph was being shaped into a single remaining throat. If every other relay went quiet, every desperate sender would aim at him. And if they aim at you, Saren said softly, then whoever controls you controls the story. Jonah turned toward her. Are you controlling me? He asked. I was sent to, she said. And I am not done deciding if I will. The words landed like a weight. Jonah did not have the luxury of being offended. He had a window coming. He had a corridor filling with ships that could not see each other. He pulled up the transmitter warm-up sequence. The Cenotaph spool read with intolerance. But the thermal margin was thinner than yesterday. The earlier sabotage had left fingerprints in the tables. He could patch them, but not perfectly, not fast. Saren stepped closer to the console. If you push full power, you will overheat, she said. If I do nothing, people die blind, Jonah replied. People die either way, Saren said. Jonah did not accept that. He opened the letter vault again, not to read comfort, but to look for context. The oldest Saren letters sat there like preserved breath. One line returned to him, phrased without drama. Watch the map when the relays start blinking out? He looked up at the live ghost map and felt as if the letter had been written for this minute. 3 hours later, Jonah took the next steps like a man counting coins before a storm. He shut down non-essential loads. He reduced cabin lighting. He delayed the recycler cleaning cycle. He pushed every watt toward the transmitter without letting the temperature spike too fast. Saren stayed near the control bay rail, watching him with a focus that felt like surveillance and something else. When Jonah caught her glance, she did not look away. She looked like a person measuring the distance between duty and choice. Jonah opened more of the letters while the transmitter warmed. He read them in order. Not for romance, but for pattern. One was dated from a time when Saren's name appeared on public traffic as a liaison officer. She wrote about keeping channels clean and pilots calm, translating fear into simple instructions. Jonah read one line twice. I thought my value was in keeping people from shouting. He glanced up at Saren. Were you really that person? He asked. Saren's voice was quiet. I was, she said. I learned how people sound when they are about to die. Jonah swallowed. And then you became what you are now? He asked. Saren did not soften her words. The war picked me up like a tool, she said. The Directorate of Quiet Victory offered a new job. Stop messages before they become battles. Jonah kept his tone even. That sounds like their polite name for murder, he said. Saren's eyes stayed steady. They said it reduces total loss, she replied. They said a clean end is kinder than a long bleed. Jonah said it without anger, as if naming a basic need. When nobody answers, people do reckless things, he said. Saren watched him for a beat. That is why I wrote, she said. You wrote, and then you came to kill the reader? Jonah asked. Saren's jaw tightened. If I did not take the contract, someone else would, she said. Jonah nodded once, the way you nod at a hard equation. And if everyone says that, nobody is human, he replied. Saren did not respond. Her silence was not empty. It sounded like restraint. When the transmit window opened, the station did not celebrate. It simply offered a thin lane through the pale drift, and Jonah tried to shove truth through it. He composed a short warning packet for Relay Stewardship Office. He duplicated it for a civilian lift guild channel. He duplicated it for a compact military address he found in the backlog. He kept the wording plain. Outages along Vesper Line. Indications of coordinated silence. Dominion fleet movement in Kestrel Corridor. Advise caution to avoid friendly fire. He hit send. The transmitter ramped. The spool spun up. Radiators outside the hull flared their angle like a bird spreading wings. Heat rose fast. A warning light flickered yellow. Jonah held his breath and watched the numbers. The yellow light turned orange. Saren spoke, low and immediate. Stop now, she said. You will cook the spool. If I stop now, nothing goes out, Jonah replied. He increased power one more notch. The station vibrated, not violently, but with a persistent hum that crawled through bone. Thermal mass absorbed the surge. For a few seconds, the output held. Then the oxygen monitor dipped. Not from a leak. From the scrubbers throttling under heat. Jonah tasted dryness and metal. The station was turning his breath into fuel for the transmitter. Saren moved with urgency. She crossed to a side panel and popped it open. She pulled a thermal bypass key from her kit and slid it in. Not fully, just enough to open auxiliary cooling. You said you did not need comfort, Jonah said. This is not comfort, Saren replied. This is triage. The radiator vanes adjusted again. Heat rise slowed. The orange light held instead of turning red. The warning packet pushed out in fragments. Like stones thrown across a river. Jonah watched the progress bar crawl. 30%, 40, 50. A reply ping surfaced on the military address. Weak but real, like a hand reaching through fog. Confirm source? It asked. Identify command intent? Jonah started typing, fast and careful. Before he could send, the channel jittered and fell silent again, as if someone had pinched it shut. A new alarm cut across the board. Dock pressure anomaly. Jonah snapped his head toward the dock camera. The skiff was still attached, but a service hatch on its underside had opened. A thin shape, no bigger than a toolbox, drifted into the docking collar. Saren's eyes narrowed. "That is not mine," she said. Jonah did not ask if she was lying. He did not have time. He cut transmitter power to prevent a spike and sealed internal doors. The packet froze at 62%. The thin shape latched to the dock wall and unfolded like a flower made of metal. Its surface shimmered with adhesive foam, designed to seal itself in place and survive vacuum. A soft entry charge. Small enough to avoid a loud breach. Strong enough to cut access to the dock lock. Jonah felt anger flare. "They want me busy with heat while they take the dock," he said. Saren nodded once. "They want you to blame the drift while the station becomes quiet," she replied. Jonah grabbed a tool bag and pushed off down the corridor. Saren followed, steps controlled, hand near her sidearm but not on it. At the dock, the air smelled sharp, like warm sealant. The device was already feeding a thread through the dock lock mechanism. Jonah knelt and snapped open the access plate. His fingers moved fast, practiced, shaking slightly. He could disarm it, maybe, if he reached the feed line before it completed the loop. Saren crouched beside him. "Do you trust me to cut the right wire?" she asked. Jonah kept his eyes on the mechanism. "I do not trust your orders," he said. "I trust your hands." Saren did not flinch. She pulled a thin cutter from her kit and waited for Jonah's nod. He nodded. She cut. The feed line snapped and recoiled. The device twitched, then went still. It did not explode. That was a relief and a warning. Whoever built it did not want fireworks. They wanted paperwork. Jonah sealed the plate and looked up. "Was that from your people?" he asked. Saren's voice stayed even. "Yes," she said. "Not the part of my people that wrote you letters." Back in the control bay, the transmitter lane was still open, but thinner now. The pale drift did not forgive delays. Jonah returned to the console and resumed transmission. He did not try to send the same wrapper again. He changed the wrapper, varied the routing hints, made it harder for a filter to recognize. Do not repeat a message when someone is listening. The progress climbed again. 70, 78, 84. Then the Cenotaph spool screamed without sound. The thermal reading spiked. The orange light jumped straight to red. The spool began shedding error codes like sparks. Jonah slammed the power down, but the heat kept rising. A locked routine had grabbed control and refused to let go, holding the transmitter at a lethal output. Quiet cut protocol was not only about silence. It was also about failure that looked accidental. Saren moved to the system locker and placed her palm against the seal reader. The console rejected her, then accepted her on a secondary path, like a door opening for a known thief. "You have access," Jonah said. "I have the wrong access," Saren replied. "And I am using it." She forced the spool governor into manual mode. The system fought her, then paused, as if waiting for a higher authority. That pause was enough. Jonah yanked the emergency cut. The transmitter dropped. The station fell into a heavy, oppressive quiet. Only fans and pumps remained. The oxygen monitor fell again. Steeper this time. The scrubbers had overheated during the spike. They were cleaning air less efficiently, and the station was eating through reserves. Jonah stared at the warning packet status. It had left Cenotaph in pieces. Incomplete. Saren looked at the same line. "How much went out?" she asked. "Enough to scare someone," Jonah said. "Not enough to tell them what to do." Saren nodded slowly. "That is how you start a war by accident," she said. Jonah looked up at her. "Then help me finish it," he said. "Help me send context." Saren did not answer immediately. Her jaw tightened, and for a second she looked like the person who might have written the older letters. "If I help you send context," she said, "I cannot go back." Jonah kept his voice low. "You already cannot," he replied. "Someone sent that device through your dock." Saren's eyes flicked to the dock alarm history. Her breathing stayed controlled. but her throat moved as she swallowed. You are right, she said. They will erase me as cleanly as they erase these relays. Outside, the ghost map showed another node go dark. The chain of silence was closing around them. Jonah opened the letter vault one more time and pulled up a draft he had not noticed before. A fragment, unsealed, written in Saren's hand. It is worse when nobody can call for help. He looked at Saren. Did you mean that? He asked. Saren answered without looking away. I meant it, she said. The station lights dimmed to conserve power. The fans sounded louder. In that noisy quiet, Jonah understood the heavy lesson of the campaign. Being right did not keep you alive. It only told you what you were about to lose. On the fourth day since Saren Kale docked at Cenotaph Relay Station, the air felt thinner even when the gauges said it was not. Jonah Weller had slept in short pieces, waking to the recycler fan changing pitch and the ghost map losing another dot. He rinsed his mouth with a mouthful of water he did not swallow, then logged the loss anyway. He sat at the control bay table with a paper log sheet. Because paper could not be overridden. Saren watched him from the rail. Her inspection suit was unzipped at the throat. Her hair was tied back like she expected to move fast. The station lights were dimmer than usual. Not for mood, but for power. We cannot shout into the drift anymore, Jonah said quietly. If we push hard, the station cooks itself. Saren nodded once. If you stay quiet, they finish the cut, she said. Then your station becomes a dead end. Jonah tapped the spool readout. The Cenotaph spool had survived the last surge, but its error flags were still warm. We have one good window left, he said. Maybe two, if the scrubbers cool and the radiators hold. If we miss it, we live on scraps. Saren leaned in, eyes on the deferred queue. They will filter anything obvious, she said. They already did, Jonah replied. Then we do not send obvious, Jonah said. He pulled up a maintenance bundle and a batch of civilian weather pings. He began nesting small fragments inside ordinary wrappers, the way a person might hide medicine in a meal for someone who refused to swallow pills. His hands shook once, then steadied when he forced himself to breathe slower. Saren studied the pattern. You want to send two versions, she said. Not copies, Jonah replied. Two versions. One goes to the Solace Compact channel. One goes to the Varick Dominion channel. Same facts, different framing. Both without blame. Saren's mouth tightened. You think the Dominion will listen? She asked. I think their people do not like surprises either, Jonah said. If both sides know the network is being blinded on purpose, they slow down. They verify. They stop firing at shadows. They start asking who benefits from silence. Saren looked toward the porthole, where the pale drift made the stars look tired. If that goes out, they will call me a traitor, she said. They already tried to kill you with that dock device, Jonah replied. Whatever you were disposable now. Saren did not argue. Her fingers flexed once, like she was testing whether her hands still belonged to her. Your plan makes you disposable too, she said. Jonah slid the log sheet across the table. On it he had written 3 lines. Plain. Halcyon Anchorage has civilian lift traffic trapped. Relay outages are coordinated. Quiet cut protocol is active. We keep it boring, Jonah said. No speeches. No hero talk. Just timestamps, routes, and what fails next. If anyone survives, they can argue later. Saren read the lines and exhaled slowly. You will need a proof chain, she said. I have it, Jonah replied. He opened the quarantine sandbox and displayed the sealed package header, the thermal sabotage logs, and the ghost map progression. Saren rested her palm on the rail. If we send this, it must land where filters cannot strip it, she said. Jonah pointed to a setting deep in the spool scheduler. Deferred queue can drip fragments across the whole window, he said. Not one burst. 1,000 small breaths. Saren's eyes narrowed. That spreads risk, she said. It also spreads survival, Jonah replied. For a moment, Neither spoke. Jonah heard the station's pumps work harder. And he remembered that truth always had a cost in watts and oxygen. 2 hours later, an inbound channel opened without Jonah requesting it. The signal came in crisp, almost cheerful, as if the pale drift had decided to cooperate. Jonah felt the hair rise on his arms. Saren stepped closer. "That is not natural," she said. The console displayed a contact tag Jonah had never seen. But the signature chain was impeccable. A name appeared after a heartbeat, formatted like a title on an old command card. Admiral Varen Holt. Jonah did not sit. He kept his hands visible and his tone controlled. "This is Jonah Weller," he said. "Steward operator of Cenotaph Relay Station." A man's voice filled the bay, calm and educated. "Mr. Weller, you are causing unnecessary turbulence," Holt said. "Your station has been stable for years. It should remain stable." "I saw your protocol," Jonah said. "Your people tried to make it look like drift interference." "It is not drift interference." Holt did not deny it. "Correct," he said. "It is policy. We remove noise from the battle space. We shorten wars. Shorter wars have fewer funerals. I am not here to frighten you. I am here to spare you the math." Jonah kept the anger in his throat instead of his hands. "Fewer funerals for who?" he asked. "For everyone, in aggregate," Holt replied. "Your species loves stories. It struggles with ledgers. I do not. Ledgers are cruel, but they are honest." Saren spoke, her voice low. "You are talking to us because you cannot guarantee the cut while he is awake," she said. Holt answered her as if greeting a colleague. "Saren Kale," he said. "You are late on your confirmation." "That is unlike you." Saren did not respond. Holt continued, patient. "This is a simple exchange," he said. "You will hand over Cenotaph spool access or you will hand over Mr. Weller. In return, I will release a civilian lift line currently held at Halcyon Anchorage." Jonah's stomach tightened. "Release how?" he asked. "By instructing my patrol to stand down," Holt said. "Your civil lift guild will leave with full fuel and no pursuit. People will live because you made a reasonable choice." Jonah pulled up Halcyon Anchorage. A cluster of civilian transponders blinked, huddled near a docking beacon. He imagined families in small cabins, listening for an update that never came, counting water cups the way he did. "And if I refuse?" Jonah asked. Holt's voice stayed gentle. "Then you keep your principles. And the convoy dies in confusion," he said. "When they die, your conscience will insist you killed them. It will not be entirely wrong." Jonah forced his breathing slow. "You are asking me to trade truth for a hostage," he said. "I am asking you to trade a malfunctioning node for immediate lives." Holt replied. "Truth is slow. Oxygen is not. By the time truth reaches them, their tanks will be empty." Saren's tone stayed flat. "You will erase him after you get the spool," she said. Holt replied without offense. "Mr. Weller cannot be trusted with this knowledge," he said. "That is not personal. It is hygiene." "So you want me to die cleanly?" Jonah asked. "I want you to disappear quietly," Holt corrected. "Your station can then fail in peace. The pale drift will take the blame. History will stay simple. Simple histories prevent copycats." Jonah stared at the waveform on the screen. It was too clean. It was a door held open for him. And he knew doors could close on fingers. "I need time," he said. "You have until your next transmit window," Holt answered. "When it opens, you will choose silence or you will choose noise. Choose the option that leaves fewer bodies." The channel cut. The room felt louder without it. Saren exhaled, sharp. "He is already inside the station's assumptions," she said. Jonah nodded slowly. "He is counting on me caring about those civilians," he said. Saren watched him. "Do you?" she asked. Jonah did not pretend. "Yes," he said. "That is why he called." 3 hours later, Jonah and Saren worked like tired mechanics before a storm tide. They moved through Cenotaph with a checklist written in pencil, not because they loved procedure, but because procedure kept panic from wasting air. Jonah rerouted power from comfort loads to cooling. He shut down spare work lights. He reduced the galley heater to off. Each cut was small, and each one made the corridor a little colder. He welcomed the chill, because cold meant the spool might survive. Saren checked seals and access plates. Especially around the dock, she found a hairline scrape near a latch that did not match Jonah's tool marks. She cleaned it, then set a passive sensor bead, the kind used to catch movement without broadcasting. "You think another device is coming?" Jonah asked. "It is already here, or it will arrive during the window," Saren replied. "They want you distracted. They want you gasping." Jonah pulled the oxygen reserve chart and felt the math tighten. If they pushed full transmitter power, the scrubbers would heat and efficiency would fall. If efficiency fell, oxygen would drop. If oxygen dropped, thinking would blur. Saren watched him read the chart. "How long can you run hard?" she asked. "Not long," Jonah admitted. "Minutes. Maybe less, if the spool overheats again." Saren nodded and opened the spool scheduler. She began splitting the warning packet into micro blocks, each wrapped inside ordinary traffic. Weather puffs, maintenance confirmations, civil lift status pings. The truth became a pattern hidden in boredom. Jonah watched her work and felt a strange ache. This was what she had been built to do. Not to love, but to place a blade where it mattered. Tonight she placed a blade inside a message. And she did it with care. "You are good at this," Jonah said. Saren did not look up. "I was trained to end conversations," she replied. "This is the opposite." Jonah loaded the dual destination list. One path toward Solace Compact Relay remnants. The other toward Varric Dominion listening posts. He kept the language dry. No accusations, no names, only evidence and risk. Saren stopped and met his eyes. "If the Dominion sees Quiet Cut Protocol named, they will hunt the source," she said. "They will hunt it anyway," Jonah replied. "Better they hunt the idea than the people trapped at Halcyon Anchorage." Saren's gaze held. "Holt offered to release them if you hand over the spool," she said. Jonah did not flinch. "He offered to release them now and kill more later," he said. "He wants silence to keep being cheap." Saren looked down at her hands. When she spoke, the words were careful. "When I wrote those letters, I believed connection was a duty," she said. "Then I learned duty can be rented." Jonah kept his voice soft. "What do you believe now?" he asked. "I believe I can still choose one thing that is mine," Saren said. "If I am going to vanish, I want it to mean something." A warning tone sounded from the window timer. The next transmit window was close, and the pale drift was already smoothing its noise, as if someone were combing dust. Jonah tightened the last clamp on a coolant bypass and wiped his palms on his suit. His breath came shallow, not from fear alone, but from the station's air growing drier. Saren checked her sidearm and set it back down. Within reach but not in hand. "If we fight, we do it without puncturing the hull," she said. Jonah gave a tight nod. "If we lose quiet," he said. Saren looked toward the dark porthole. "And if we win, we still might not live," she said. Jonah did not answer with a vow. He turned back to the console. Because the countdown did not care what people promised. The window timer hit the last minute. Cenotaph Relay Station held its breath, and Jonah Weller set his fingers on the transmit key like it was a trigger that could save strangers or doom them. Saren stood beside him, close enough that her shadow crossed the controls. "When you send, there is no walking back," she said. Jonah nodded once. "I know," he said. Outside, the pale drift thinned for a moment that would not return. The transmit window opened like a thin seam in a heavy sky. On the external cameras, the pale drift looked calmer for a moment, as if the dust had decided to hold its breath. Jonah Weller did not trust that calm. He trusted only the numbers and the heat they promised. He set the transmitter to manual. The console protested, then accepted. Autopilot would have lowered output when temperature rose. Jonah could not afford safety. Not tonight. He watched the Cenotaph spool climb into power. The gauge rose in small steps, each one a bargain. More watts meant more reach. More reach meant more heat. More heat meant less oxygen. His mouth felt dry before the oxygen monitor even moved. He swallowed and tasted metal, the way you taste a storm before it arrives. Saren Kale stayed by the corridor junction, not in the control bay. She did not want her body between Jonah and the panel. Her suit jacket was sealed and her gloves were tight. The sidearm was on her hip, but her hands stayed empty. No sudden moves, she said quietly. Not from you. Not from me. Jonah nodded without looking away from the console. If someone comes through that dock, we do not shoot, he said. We trap. We block. We breathe. Understood, Saren said. Jonah triggered the deferred cue drip. The warning packet, broken into micro blocks, began slipping into outgoing traffic like threads woven through cloth. It did not look like a broadcast. It looked like routine. A weather ping carried a timestamp. A maintenance confirmation carried a route anomaly. A civil status update carried quiet cut protocol in a place filters would not expect. A second path carried the same facts in different order, aimed at listeners who would distrust compact vocabulary. The transmitter held. The progress bars crawled. Heat rose anyway. The spool temperature turned yellow. Jonah increased cooling through the bypass. Radiator vanes outside the hull angled hard, throwing what heat they could into space. The oxygen monitor dipped by a fraction. Scrubber efficiency fell a fraction more. Jonah felt the change in his lungs first. A thinness that made him want to breathe faster, which only wasted air. He forced himself to slow down. Minute by minute, the window lane remained open. It would not stay open long. Jonah watched the drift noise floor begin to climb again, faintly, like a tide returning. Come on, he whispered. Saren watched corridor cameras and the dock sensor bead. A new alert blinked at the edge of Jonah's screen. Incoming priority channel. He did not want to open it. He opened it anyway. Admiral Varen Holt's voice arrived crisp. Mr. Weller, Holt said. You are transmitting. Jonah kept his voice low. I am doing my job, he replied. Your job is to relay authorized traffic, Holt said. This is unauthorized, unhelpful, and statistically dangerous. Saren leaned in. He is trying to distract you, she said. Jonah kept his eyes on the drip schedule and rising heat. Holt continued, calm as a lecture. You have been offered a reasonable exchange, he said. Stop now, and a civilian line leaves Halcyon Anchorage alive. Continue, and their deaths will become part of the fog you claim to hate. Jonah imagined those civilian transponders clustered like frightened birds. He imagined a child asking why no one answered. He kept his tone even. You are using them as leverage, he said. I am using them as proof, Holt corrected. Proof that sentiment can be aimed. Proof that you will burn your station for strangers. Proof that my strategy works because people like you exist. The spool temperature shifted to orange. Saren whispered. Do not chase the last %. That is how he kills you. Jonah swallowed. If I stop, the context dies, he said. If the context dies, someone fires early. Holt's voice softened. If you insist on continuing, he said, I will make what happens next look clean. A valid accident. A sealed report. Your station will become another drift casualty. History will remain stable. That is my responsibility. Jonah stared at the waveform and felt cold clarity. Holt was not threatening pain. He was threatening erasure. Saren's jaw tightened. You are not saving lives, she said into the channel. You are saving your narrative. Holt paused for a beat. Saren Kale, he said. I expected better discipline. Saren did not flinch. I expected you to notice the humans you count, she replied. The transmitter lane narrowed further. Jonah watched the noise floor rise. The dock sensor bead blinked once. Saren moved before Jonah could speak. She pushed off down the corridor with controlled speed, silent in low gravity. Jonah kept transmitting. Saren's voice returned through the internal intercom. Dock collar movement, she said. Someone is here or something is moving. Jonah felt his pulse jump. He kept his fingers on manual controls. Do not fire, he said. Seal compartments. Already doing it, Saren replied. A dull vibration ran through the deck. Not an impact, but mechanical strain, like a wrench turned too hard. Jonah saw the dock pressure readout twitch. Holt spoke again, smoother than the station's alarms. Your oxygen is trending down, he said. Your spool is trending hot. You are making the math easy for me. Jonah clenched his teeth. Then stop forcing it, he said. I am not forcing anything, Holt replied. I am observing. Saren returned to the bay. Breath controlled but faster now. She carried a small object in her gloved hand. It was a thin control puck, stamped with office markings and a Dominion registry number beneath. It looked designed to confuse blame. It was wedged in the dock latch track, she said. Remote activated. It would have jammed the lock and blamed your maintenance. Jonah stared at it. They want the station to fail like it is my fault, he said. Saren lifted the puck. They want me to be the witness who signs that story, she said. Holt's voice stayed patient. Saren, report compliance, he said. Confirm the quiet cut. Saren's eyes flicked to Jonah, then to the oxygen monitor. She spoke slowly. No, she said. The bay went quiet for a beat, except for fans and the thin whine of the spool. Holt did not raise his voice. You are refusing a lawful order, he said. Do you understand the cost? I understand the cost, Saren said. I have paid it for years. I am done paying it for you. Jonah felt something loosen in his chest. It was not oxygen, it was certainty. Holt paused, then spoke with the same calm. Then I will proceed with accident protocol, he said. Your death will be clean. Your identity will be filed as compromised. Your earlier letters will be listed as disinformation. Your redemption will be denied. Saren's mouth tightened. That is your talent, she said. You kill people twice. Jonah watched the transmit schedule. The final microblocks were near. The lane would close in less than 2 minutes. The spool temperature was flirting with red. Saren looked at him. Keep sending, she said. I will hold the system steady. Jonah's voice came out rough. We do not have to die here, he said. Saren shook her head once. If we both run, the context dies, she said. And Holt wins without firing a shot. I can take the blame longer than you can. I have been built for it. Jonah felt a sting behind his eyes. You are not a tool, he said. Prove it, Saren replied. Let me choose this. The spool temperature crossed into red. Jonah held manual output for the last stretch anyway, because dropping now would scatter the packet into nonsense. He watched the oxygen monitor fall another notch. His head felt light, as if gravity had changed. Saren moved to the system locker and forced the governor into a stable band. Using Holt's access against him, the console tried to reject her, then hesitated. She used that hesitation to lock the spool at a controlled peak. It was like holding a door open with your shoulder while the frame burned. The last microblocks left Cenotaph in a steady drip. Jonah watched the confirmation flags flicker. Not clean, not perfect, but real. The lane began to close, and the noise floor rose like surf. He let the output fall in steps, careful not to shock the spool. Red softened to orange, then yellow, then held at strained yellow. He exhaled, and the breath felt thin. Saren's shoulders sagged slightly. She had been holding her own breath too. A new ping appeared on the Civilian Lift Guild band, weak and delayed, but unmistakable. Halcyon Anchorage convoy moving. The message read, Dominion patrol standing down. Repeat, patrol standing down. Jonah stared, stunned. He released them, he said. Saren's face went flat. He released them because the truth is out now, she said. He is buying time. Holt's voice returned one final time, quieter. You have made your choice, he said. Now accept the consequences. The channel cut. The station alarm sounded again. This time it was system containment. A lock from outside, pushing Cenotaph toward a controlled failure state. Saren steadied herself. He is trying to brick the station, she said. Force a shutdown that looks like heat damage. Jonah's hands moved without thinking. He began isolating modules, pulling the station away from the lock step by step. It was like fighting a flood with towels. He did it anyway. Saren watched the ghost map. One new dot appeared, not in the old office color, but in a plain, ugly white. A crude relay beacon had come online somewhere in the corridor. It looked like a civilian rig or a field crew trying to stitch the network back together with whatever they had. The truth had reached someone who still knew how to build. Jonah blinked hard and forced air into his lungs. What happens to us? He asked. We keep the station alive as long as we can, Saren said. If it dies after the message, not before. Jonah looked at her, and the love he had imagined through letters became something harder and more honest. It was not romance. It was respect under pressure. He reached out, took her wrist, and squeezed once. Saren met his eyes. Go, she said. Get the scrubbers back. I will keep the lock from closing. Jonah hesitated, then he nodded. Not because he wanted to leave her alone, but because she had earned the right to decide. He pushed off toward life support, moving fast through the dim corridor. Behind him, Saren stayed at the console, shoulders squared. She held the line without a weapon. Just stubborn hands and a choice that could not be filed as an accident. Outside, the pale drift thickened again, but somewhere in that dust, a small packet of truth was already moving faster than fear. A day later, ship time felt thicker, as if every minute had weight. Cenotaph was still alive, but only in a narrow band. Lights stayed low, fans stayed loud, and the air tasted like warm metal and clean effort. Jonah Weller sat on the deck by the scrubber bay and listened to the filters chew through stale air. His hands shook less now. The oxygen line stopped falling, then rose by a thin, stubborn slice. In the control bay, the ghost map looked different. The old clean routes were gone, but new white dots blinked into place. They were ugly and uneven, yet they answered. Saren Kale remained at the console, eyes half closed, one glove off so she could feel the vibration of the keys. Her hair was damp at the temples. She looked like a person who had been holding a door against a storm. Jonah stepped in quietly. Did it reach anyone? He asked. It reached enough, Saren said. I saw the replies start. Then I killed the channel. They will build around the silence now. A weak civilian ping arrived, plain and human. It was not a thank you. It was a status list and a safe route update. The kind of boring message that meant people were still trying. Jonah leaned on the rail and watched Saren breathe. You can rest, he said. Not yet, Saren replied. Later, when this place is not the last throat in the dark. Outside the porthole, the pale drift rolled on, uncaring. Inside, a small truth had made it harder for fear to pretend it was math. If you are listening in the dark tonight, remember this. Truth does not bring back the people we lost. It does something quieter. It arrives a little earlier than fear, and it gives someone one more second to lower a shaking hand before they pull a trigger. On a lonely relay in the pale drift, that was enough to change the shape of a war, one ordinary message at a time. If this story stayed with you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so more listeners can find these quiet journeys through the stars.